Hey guys, did you know that Trump is bad? Because Trump is bad, guys. I've never heard that in the past 2 years, but now I know. Now I know that Trump is bad. So you see this cover here for the 2017 DC Holiday Special, and DC does things like this every year, and actually not just for Christmas, but for almost every holiday. And I've read a fair number of them through the years, not every one. I'm not like a collector in that regard, but I've read enough of them to know how these things usually go. They're short stories written by different teams of writers and artists about ranging from classic characters like the ones you see on the cover to more obscure ones. So this cover here is kind of it's really misleading. You see the big three, you see Flash, you see the Teen Titans, and they look like they're all having fun, and they look like it's festive, and they look like it's going to be happy, and it turns out that this is really depressing in kind of like a creeping, low-key sort of way, but by the end of this, I was just really kind of bummed, honestly. All of these stories are just colored by this sort of really sort of depressed, bummed-out worldview about how terrible the world is. And you see it from the first panel. You see Constantine sitting in a bar, and he's telling you about how terrible the world is right now, and you've got Trump on the TV, and you've got North Korea firing a missile, and he's just going on at some length about how terrible the state of the world is right now, which it's like, the whole reason Constantine was created was to say stuff like that. He's been saying this stuff for 30 years now. I mean, this isn't anything new. It's like nuclear war, narcissistic, obsessive politicians. We know that. That's nothing new. Constantine has been complaining about this since 1985. But we see that Constantine is not alone in his ramblings. We see that Clark Kent is also not terribly happy with things. It turns out that he comes to this bar every year on Christmas Eve, gets a club soda, and reminisces about the world, and he's like, well, you know, it's been rough. And the bartender, Bibbo, is trying to cheer him up about taking cues from Superman, because Superman always makes everything better, but of course, as we know, Superman isn't feeling so hot about that. So then Bibbo, that's the framing device for this whole story, is that all these stories are Bibbo telling Superman holiday stories to try to cheer him up, but all of these stories are really depressing. They're all about death and loss and depression and just feeling generally crappy about life. I mean, I've spent 2 Christmases over in a big old ship in the Middle East that was in the process of actively bombing people. You don't have to convince me that Christmas can be crappy, but I don't read comic books to confirm that. So the first story, it's written by Denny O'Neil, legendary Batman and DC writer Denny O'Neil, artist by Steve Epting, another really well-known artist. And it's about this kid who, 30 years ago, his grandmother died from exposure because these people wouldn't let them in their home, and so he comes to take revenge on that family years later, and Batman stops him. And that's it. That's the story. There's no, hope here at all. There's no, message. It's just, I don't know, don't kill people. I guess. It's like, this is a Christmas story? This is what counts as a Christmas story now? And then we get Green Arrow, Black Canary. I don't know who the writer is. Merg Cred Scott. I don't even know if that's a male or female name. Pencils are by Phil Hester, though. And so we get Black Canary just being the classic cynic. Black Canary is going down the whole spiel. You've probably heard it by now because everybody that thinks that they're edgy and cool says this kind of stuff. That, Christmas is just this materialistic, shell of a holiday nowadays and blah, 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 whatever. Christmas is a big deal in my family, okay? Is it kind of crass and materialistic? Yes, but it's more than that. And, you don't need to hear that over and over again. And that's what the story boils down to, but even then, it's not really so much about the Christmas spirit. It's just about how awesome Green Arrow and Black Canary are. More so than the spirit of the season or whatever. Then we get Tom King and Francesco Francavilla on a Sergeant Rock story of all things. And once again, this is not a Christmas story. It's just this a member of Easy Company ends up killing a Nazi officer over several days, even though, like, how did they not die of, like, starvation? And it's not even about Christmas. It's just about how crappy war is, and then this officer gets killed by a Jewish soldier. I mean, I realize Tom King has probably spent more Christmases than I have away from home and doing probably unsavory things to unsavory people, but so this may have been numerous Christmases for him, but it's not much of a story. It's not much of a Christmas story. It doesn't even say that it happens on Christmas, I don't think. This one's good. This one's pretty okay, too. Joshua Williamson, writer, Neil Googe, artist, and it's a Flash story. And this one's actually kind of funny and upbeat, and it kind of stands out for that reason, and where Flash is able to actually help people by getting them all home for Christmas when the airport is frozen up because of a snowstorm. And then he's still able to make it back in time to spend it with Wally, which, is Wally even around still? I thought something bad happened to him. I don't know. We get a Deathstroke story, which, this one's actually kind of funny. I mean, this scene here of Deathstroke holding up Santa Claus. We have Christopher Priest story, Tom Grumman on pencils. This one's at least kind of funny. It has shades of both two of the greatest Christmas stories of all time, which is Die Hard and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. So it's at least got that one going for it. Although, if I wasn't reading the Deathstroke Defiant series, a lot of this would have gone over my head, because there's a lot of references to people and to things that otherwise. They're even using snowmobiles, like in Die Hard 2. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so this one isn't bad because it's at least cool. Then we have Dan Didio and Matthew Clark on the Atomic Knights in Silent Night. So like I said, I've read numerous ones of the holiday-themed anthologies over the years, and Dan Didio often gives himself a story, and he always picks, like, really weird, offbeat characters. Like, I think I've heard of the Atomic Knights. I know nothing about them. I don't know what they do, or what their powers are, or what their story is, or anything. And this one's kind of okay all by itself, but I think they're talking about the refugee crisis with these, like, plant people. I don't really know what the deal with the plant people is. And it turns out that they didn't mean them no harm. They just wanted to share a Christmas tree with them. That's all. This is one of those things that if I didn't know some of the trends in comic books and in politics and in the world right now, I'd probably be okay with it. But I can't help but think this was inspired by the Syrian war refugee thing. So it's harder to just enjoy it on its own terms. If I'm wrong about that, then that's on me. But if I'm not wrong about it, then that's on them. Teen Titans and Holiday Spirit. Shea Fontana, writer. Otto Schmidt, artist. Shea Fontana, I'm pretty sure she does the DC Superhero Girls thing and did an arc on Wonder Woman recently. Otto Schmidt, I ought to know that name. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. This one was probably the encapsulation of everything that this story's about, where it's trying to be upbeat and optimistic, and it's just failing utterly. Because this is a demon that feeds off of negative emotions, essentially, and it chooses Christmas because Christmas can be a reminder of, like, terrible things. And it's like, geez, is this how you see Christmas? That this is where you only think about the bad things? I mean, yeah, Christmas can be bittersweet, but the person who saves the day is Starfire, and that's only because she has no particular attachment to Christmas. It's just not a thing for her. So it's just talking about all the negative stuff that Christmas brings up. It's like, I don't want to read about that. This one is really super depressing. It's about a group of astronauts up on the International Space Station that are apparently they're stuck up here while nuclear war is just about to happen, and they don't know what they're going to do. And then Swamp Thing comes up and kind of saves them, but not really. And this one is just like really existentially kind of horrifying, even if it does have really good art like this. It's Scott Bryan Wilson writer and Nick Klein as artist, and it's just super depressing. It's like, you know, they're acting like nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war is something new. We've been living under the threat of nuclear war since 1949. It's like, could it, you know, yeah, the bombs could drop any day. Okay, guess what? You could also get hit by a car tomorrow. You know, get over it. Honestly. You get Wonder Woman and Batman in story, which is written by Greg Rucka, Bilquis Everly, artist. Is that really her name? Is that her real first name? It could be. I somehow doubt it. This one, it's not even a Christmas story. It's a Yule story. It's a winter solstice story. Like, Greg Rucka is one of those guys that social media kind of ruined him for me. Like, I knew he was a left-leaning liberal guy just from the writing that he's done in the past, but seeing like him go basically crazy on social media after Trump won, and him just retweeting people like Robert Reich and other left-wing ideologues every single day, like almost obsessively, it's kind of hard to look at you seriously after that. I don't know what he's doing right now, but I do know how much he hates Trump. So this story is about Batman and Wonder Woman trying to find some kind of hope at the end of the year during the winter solstice, and they light this bonfire, which is something that a lot of especially European peoples used to do back for the winter solstice. Once again, it's not really about like Christmas. Like, who the freak cares about the winter solstice celebration anymore? Other than a few weirdo pagans. I used to actually go to pagan services when I was in the Navy just to see what they were about, and it was hard to take seriously. But anyway, so then we get the end where Clark Kent is talking to Constantine. Apparently Constantine knows that Clark is Superman. Go figure. So this is the image that they choose to end the book on, which kind of sums it up, the entire thing. As far as I'm concerned, Constantine just looking at the reader with this really sour look on his face. But then they really shoot themselves in the foot by reprinting one of the classic like holiday specials. I've seen this reprinted more than once in other stuff. I don't know exactly where it originated from, but it's basically a Batman Christmas story, and you can tell right away that the art is by Neil Adams. And this one is much closer to what Christmas is about than anything, which is that basically all of Batman's work throughout the year pays off, because Gordon invites him for one night off, and you see Batman doing something that you very rarely see him do, which is like caroling and having fun. Meanwhile, throughout the city, people start to commit crimes, and then something reminds them of Batman, and they end up not doing the crime, just of their own volition. And that's really what Christmas is about, because Batman is such a symbol to Gotham. He's done so much for so many people that he has positively affected the world around him. And because of that, he gets one night off. And that's really what Christmas is about. That's what you teach kids when they're young, which is, you know, if you're good throughout the year, you get presents. If you're bad throughout the year, you get coal in your stocking. My parents actually gave me coal one year. It's a long story. I don't want to get into it, but, you know, the point is that the things that you do to people come back to you. So if they're good things, then, like in this story, good things happen to you. Or if you do bad things, then it won't go so good. But the point is that Christmas is sort of the culmination of the entire year before it, and of what you do as a person. And this story talks about that very elegantly, in a really like heartfelt way. Whereas, except for the Flash story, and maybe the Deathstroke story, and maybe kind of the Green Arrow story, all these other ones are just like super depressing. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, I guess shooting a Nazi soldier might be hopeful to some people, but that was like, you know, we're talking stuff that hasn't been relevant for 70 years. And then the fact that this story comes right before the only like real Christmas story, as far as I'm concerned, it's really weird. So Yeah, this book is $10 for this anthology, and I feel like it's almost like a self-flagellating title that all these writers, like almost none of them had anything good to say, and they just had to like really try hard to say anything even halfway positive, and it ends up coming out kind of forced. So I don't know. Tell me what you thought. Tell me if I'm missing something. Tell me if I'm just being a Scrooge. Like, comment, subscribe. In any case, this is Unmake Chevron signing off.